I have been a little bit low energy this week, so I'm feeling like maybe like a 6.5 today. I'm gonna say my color is like a traffic light green. And a little technical difficulty, no worries. And I believe the last international trip I took, I haven't been out of the country since right before I graduated high school. And when we did go, I went to Costa Rica on a school trip. As part of a program that my high school did for seniors, which is actually interesting because Marcus Garvey spent some time in Costa Rica after, I believe, as part of his journey through Central America. So, yeah. And I will pass it to Mama Ramla.
Hello. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me, M?
Fair nod in their head, I think.
Muted.
Okay, we're unmuted.
Yeah, I heard you loud and clear.
All righty. Um, I was just thinking if I can't say that this is out of the country trip because I went to Puerto Rico. That's the last place I went, and that's an American territory.
Yeah.
So before then, I went to Senegal,
Mm.
and that's been way long time ago. Um,
Number and color?
my number would be, I think, maybe an 8. And even though the sky is gray, one of my favorite colors is blue. I find it okay. My color's blue. That's all I need to say. Uh, anything else?
No, just pass it to the next person.
Hey, can you hear me?
Who is that?
Okay, my name is Brother Sekou. I am Mama Ramla's little cousin and a product of Imhotep Adisa, his mentorship.
What's up,
Back
Seiko?
in the 90s. What's up, Brother L?
How you been?
I'm good, man. I'm well. Yeah, the last international trip that I took, uh, I was in the seventh grade. And we just crossed the border over to Laredo, Mexico. Yeah. My number today will probably be about a 7. And what was the other? Oh, my color? Blue. Definitely blue. Yeah.
You can just set it back down. And let's pass it to Khaled.
Thank you. Cool. Okay. My color is blue. My number is 6, and never been out of the country, so I mean the state. So I think I'd just go maybe Brazil. Hmm. I'll pass it to Miss Fair or Am.
Okay, M's already gone.
I
And
haven't.
oh, you have?
Oh, you got though.
Oh, okay, and
I
then
know you
you'll be
got a habit
next.
of doing that. Oh, M's gone already. I know I'm not an elder yet. I understand that. A senior, but not an elder.
A senior, a senior for sure. Okay, I'm Yellow Chin, and I've been to a couple of countries in Africa, but that's been maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And so when somebody says out of the country, I am so used to just being here in the Midwest, maybe going to DC, maybe going to Tampa. I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico last week. Wow, I felt like I was in Mexico. I mean, I really, really, we stayed on the Pueblo People's reservation for a conference. And so it was out in the middle of nowhere. And it was just really special to see the sky look that close so that the stars were brighter and seemed closer. The planets seemed bigger and closer. So when you say out of the country, that sky is certainly out of what I'm used to looking at. considering that when I go places, it's usually inside the city. And I'll pass it to you, Will.
Well, I think my color today is going to be red and black in the spirit of Legba, God of Crossroads, Yoruba Pantheon. It actually tied to the same trip that Miss Fair and I were on in New Mexico. One of the drummers there drummed a ceremonial song uh, in honor of red and black Legba. So that's my color. My number today is going to be 11. It's a master number, which means intuition. And if you were at the staff meeting on Friday, I was not. Pambana and had a whole presentation that included intuition as part of her presentation. And I raised it up also tied to the trip because, and this is not something I generally do, but the room number was 2225. And when I called Pambana, who is many things, and one in this case is numerologist, and some said, let me call him. I don't know why. Maybe it was my intuition. And the numbers led to 11 as the master number from my trip. The last time I was out of the country was actually when I was in New Mexico on Pueblo Reservation. Uh, and, it at one point in time was like most of the U.S., not uh, part of the United States territory. So my last international travel was to Albuquerque, New Mexico on Pueblo Reservation. And last part of that introduction would be, in addition to location, one of the things that I've been experiencing often when I'm around other indigenous people in some of these, what I'll call these spaces of activity, is they are real clear about uh, who they are and what needs to happen. And so, not a lot of time spent in woe is me, woe is me, woe is me. So, that's my last international trip. Pass it back to you, Chinyela.
Let's hear from Alvin.
Hey everybody, and hey Dr. Ramala. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I am quite sick today.
Can you hear us, Alvin? You cut out there for a second.
Sick as a dog. Got that stomach virus going around. But body is down, green, and the last. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I said the last trip I took was to Thailand when I was working with the study abroad program almost 15 years ago. And I'll pass it to whoever's next.
I think you're our last one, Nas.
Okay.
Hey y'all, Nas here, feeling like my usual purple 9.5, and I haven't had the chance to visit somewhere out of the country, an international trip yet. But if I could, geez, it's hard for me to pick one. Um, I don't know. I don't know where I'd go actually. This is a good one. Maybe, you know what? Somewhere with some water. Somewhere with some water. That's how I'm feeling. Yes, ma'am. Water and a beach. That's what I need.
Yeah, I know that's right. Well, yeah, wonderful. Thanks everybody for checking in. We may have more people join us in the Zoom room or in the space as the conversation continues. And if we do, we'll just wait for the natural pauses in the conversation to let them do their check-ins as well. But for now, we should let's go ahead and get into it. And I think a great place to start would really just be with a little just like historical information on Marcus Garvey. We can get a little bit acquainted with who he was, and what he represents today. and then maybe we can dive a little bit deeper into, this conversation about, you know, really, I think about like diaspora political movements, particularly political movements of the Black diaspora, and how they've evolved through time, the what forms they take today, and maybe where they're headed. So yeah, I have some information on my screen here that I put together for a social media post that we put out earlier this week. Go follow our social media if you haven't already. We're the Kepler Institute on everything. But I know that we do have some people here in the room with us who are familiar with Marcus Garvey. So I'd love to maybe give folks a chance. I'd love to maybe start by hearing from some other folks in the room. Like, what do you know about Marcus Garvey, about his story? And then maybe I can come in on the back end and fill in any details. So, yeah. Anybody want to jump that off? Oh, take the mic. Yeah.
I wanted to start by letting Garvey speak for himself for about a minute about what he was about. So,
Yeah. You want me to? If you send that to me, I can send it to Nas and he can put it up on the screen. Just text it to me.
Oh no, it's just him talking.
Yeah. Okay. We can give that a try.
Citizens of Africa, I speak in the name of the Universal Negro Women Association and African Community.
Can y'all hear that? Oh.
Negro Women Association is an organization that seeks to unite into one solid body the 400 million Negroes of the world. The link of the 15 million Negroes of the United States of America, with the 20 million Negroes of the West Indies, the 40 million Negroes of South and Central America, with the 280 million Negroes of Africa, for the purpose of bettering our industrial, commercial, educational, social, and political conditions. The language we make today is divided into separate racial sensitive nationalities. Each race and each nationality is endeavoring to work out its own destiny.
Okay, that's enough. Could y'all hear that?
Could folks hear that? No? Okay. Speaking to the mic, please. Yeah.
I have wanted him to be able to speak for himself about what it was he was trying to accomplish. And this obviously was a speech he did after he had come to America and began to organize the UNIA nationally and internationally. But the UNIA started as a Jamaican confraternity, kind of an organization that was about social issues and adequate and education, especially. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Um, and then he while he was in Jamaica, also for a minute he worked for a newspaper, and he also was involved in the union. After traveling to Central America, he decided that he wanted to do a school like Tuskegee. And so he wanted to come to America to talk to Booker T. Washington, who unfortunately had died the year before. So, but by him seeing the United States, he traveled around and decided to headquarter the UNIA in New York, in Harlem, on 135th Street. That's where we get to know Garvey. But I want to just say that I don't believe in hagiographies where you hold somebody up to this great standard, they're a hero, they can do no wrong, and they're superhuman or whatever. And as I was telling Chin, is sometimes I think people do that because they don't want to be responsible themselves. They don't want to feel like, you know, they can head up an organization like the UNIA or any other organization. And so therefore they say that they are not qualified to do that. And it's just not true. So I want to talk about answer all your questions. But I want to talk about Garvey as an activist and go down the rabbit hole with him to see what he experienced to pull off what the UNIA was able to accomplish and also what they lost.
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting, that's a very I think that's a very interesting like angle to take this conversation from, like not just about like Marcus Garvey as Marcus Garvey, but like Marcus Garvey as a part and like an introduction to a greater movement and like moment in time that like is like still very like, like we live on the work that these people and this like organization like laid out in a lot of ways. So and the other organizations that were active during that time as well, because I think you can't deny that like the tension between the UN organizations like the UNIA and the NAACP, I think is definitely also like a creative force. So yeah, thank you for that, Mama Ramla.
And there were others too. There was, in addition to Du Bois and the NAACP, there was Philip Randolph. There was the Black Socialist Organization, and then there was the African Brotherhood, which was about bringing communism to the community. And the thing I learned about looking at Garvey as an activist and these other people as activists is that they believed that what they were doing was the right thing to do for the people, not necessarily that they disliked each other, and they did. They did, but that they were trying to do something to make things better for Black people. Um, and the UNIA got further than they did because one, the UNIA was independent. Du Bois worked with the NAACP that was formed by intellectuals, Black and white, and scholars. But they didn't own a building. They didn't have a lot of monetary resources outside of the Crisis, the magazine, which was very popular. And some of these others didn't have money either. But what the UNIA did that was brilliant is that they had a strong constitution and bylaws. And they would help people in the beginning from this one-story building that they bought. They would help people who needed food or shelter, etc. And when they held meetings, they would always make sure there was somebody there popular to draw in a crowd. And one of the people who did that was Henrietta Benton Davis, because at the time she was like Angela Bassett now, or Halle Berry or somebody. And she would come and speak, and it brought a lot of people out. They would have choirs and singers. They would invite people from other groups, whether they were Black, white, or whatever. They supported Sinn Féin, which was fighting for liberation of Ireland, and so forth and so on. So they would have these big gatherings. So a lot of people knew about them. They had the Negro World newspaper, which also included a page for those who spoke Spanish as well. And he showed us that we could raise money. This was the first mass organization for Black people in the country because it reached practically every state, islands in the Caribbean, and interaction with African activists as well. First thing I think Garvey taught me is that, we've been struggling for so long, for over 400 years, is that older activists hand things over to younger activists, right? Or experienced activists will help somebody who seems to have gained some traction, right? So he had, I just want to name about three people who really played a big role. Hubert Harrison ran what we call the Liberty League at that time. And Garvey and UNIA people supported that organization, and the Liberty League almost turned into the UNIA. So many of them went there. Uh, Bruce Gritt, who was a newspaper man, black newspaper man, I just will say he was the Roland Martin of his day. And then Arturo Schomburg, who, you know, the Schomburg Center relied upon. He was a bibliophile. That's the good word, y'all. He was a bibliophile, and he had all these books, and this collection is still in Harlem right now under the auspices of the New York Public Library. They helped him a lot, and they also caused him a problem that I didn't like at all. You know how they always show Garvey with that big Mason hat on and that uniform, or in a
We use that picture in the social media post in the uniform.
the only time he wore that kind of stuff is when there was a UNIA
Yeah,
parade,
yeah.
or if he was given a big lecture.
Most of his pictures, he's in suits. So the fact that that's the famous one is actually pretty funny.
But I think that's put out there by people who want to, ridicule him and say that he was somebody who, shouldn't be taken seriously. But just like Du Bois wore three-piece suits every day, so did Garvey.
Yeah.
Every day. So, I think that he's shown on the one side as this great hero of everything in the world, or he's ridiculed. So he had these other people who were seasoned fighters and activists that supported his organization. I mean, they were organized all the way down to their chapters and branches. Everybody knew they had to pay their dues or whatever. They had a death benefit, so if somebody in your family passed, they could contribute toward that. And they had the Negro World. They had the Negro Factories Corporation, which was supposed to be, the down payment on a lot of industrial projects. The one they got up and running was a factory that made all the uniforms that UNIA people wore around the country for their programming. And they also did a millinery, which is, making hats and the like. And they had a restaurant. So they were getting some income in there. But what made UNIA put them on the map really was the Black Star Line. And, people, I guess they think he had some kind of heavenly Greek dream. And I sure have black ships. No, it was practical. It was on the ground. It was men who were stevedores that worked on ships who said, man, this would be a good thing for us to do to get some kind of economic improvement for ourselves. Is that, remember, now we're talking 1919 to 1923. The only way you could ship stuff or sell your products was that you had to ship, right? And so they realized if they were to start a shipping line, they would be able to have some revenue, but also jumpstart an enclave economy between Black people in the United States and the island. And then at some point in the future, that they would trade with Africa, and then have a ship that would go up and down the West African coast. So it made sense, because Black business people in America and the islands, they would have to wait before they put their exports on the ships. They would have to wait till the white businesses had their stuff on the ship. And so if there was room, you could put your stuff on, If it wasn't, oh well.
You tilt the mic towards your face. Just make sure it's tilted towards you.
Can you hear me, Imhotep?
Yeah, he's saying yeah.
Yeah. And so the islands had the same problem. And if you lived on a smaller island, smaller than Jamaica or Hispaniola or something like that, you didn't get any shipping at all. So these were reasons why people supported the Black Star Line. Some wanted to just be investments. They were like, Black investors was like, if this thing gets off the ground, I can make some money on this. Black business can grow. And at some point, we can just be in international trade, trading with anybody, And so that's why they took that up to do that. And what they were going to do at first was to charter a ship and use that ship. But what happened is that even though they had this good constitution, they had a good financial system in line, they commingled all their money. They commingled the money they made off the Negro world with the money from the Factories Corporation, with the money from the Black Star Line, contributions coming in for the Black Star Line. And one of the things I thought was really wise that they did is that they looked at the economic situation of the various Black populations in the diaspora and in Africa to determine how much they should commit on the stock. In America, it was $1 a share. In the West Indies, it was 50 cents a share. And in Africa, 25 cents a share. Right? And a lot of people came together in some cities, and they could put they put their little nickels and quarters in there to get $1 together to buy a share of stock. Because the UNIA was they were organized. They had a bureaucracy and all of that. The financial committee did not like that they were commingling the money, that it was wrong for that to happen, right? And so they debated and argued at the convention and at other meetings. And then finally, a person went to the district attorney for New York and said that they were, committing malfeasance or what have you. And so the district attorney forced them to incorporate and buy a ship and gave them a deadline when to buy it. Otherwise, they would have to return all the donations and the stock sales. Now, could they do that? Because they're not already spending their money right. So they couldn't very well give it back. And so they rushed.
Yeah, thank you.
They rushed and they gave them a deadline to buy a ship. Theory is one thing, practice is another. And I was telling Chin that's one of the things I always admired about Imhotep is that you have never just held on to an ideological position or a program and not allow resources and situations to be included in what it was you were trying to do. And you would always be open to growth, to change. You've never been, Paulette, I guess, could tell me different.
Well,
But
I'll just say it. I got a lot of bosses around here.
you've never been dogmatic,
Thank you.
you're open and that's a good thing. But the theory of the Black Star Line made perfect sense. Du Bois even championed. He said that was a good idea. UNIA had a good idea. He wrote an article in the crisis.
They ain't even like each other.
Oh God, no, no. But he said, now this is a good idea, until they start having problems. Where's the problem start? It's one thing to say you want a ship. It's another thing to say you're gonna buy a ship.
Mm-hmm.
So they had not checked that out. How much a freight ship would cost, right? And the price was around $400,000, and this is in 1919, right? If you wanted a good ship, plus it's the end of World War One. A lot of ships have been damaged, so that ups the price, right? Because there's a shortage of ships.
Yeah.
They didn't have $400,000. They did not have it. The other thing is that, again, to say you wanted this business to be Black owned and operated, and we're going to have a way to make some revenue, you had to have Black captains, right? For these big ships. Guess how many Black captains there were?
One.
We got 3.
You have 3. And so they kept trying to find a ship that they could afford, and then they finally got one, that had survived the war from Canada, and it cost $167,000. But because it cost $167, $1,000 meant that it couldn't have been in good shape. I mean, if a good ship costs $400,000 and you paying $167,000, something's up. And so
Sorry, we got a fire truck rolling past.
We can't hear it.
Okay, continue. You can keep going.
where was I at? Oh,
Fire sale.
$167,000.
Fire
Okay.
sale.
And then fire sale, I like that, Paulette. And then the other thing is how much coal, because they weren't using oil then.
Mm-hmm.
How much coal do you think it takes to get a ship from New York to Jamaica or to Costa Rica or wherever?
Probably more than China had on the Titanic.
It took tons of coal. So you had to buy the tons of coal. You had to pay the shipment. You had to pay the captain. You had to have food for them to eat. All those factors that when you theorize and being eloquent, you don't really think about, right? And so that was a problem. The ship broke down, but it got to the islands, and the people on the islands they were so excited to see this great big ship. It was Black owned and all this, and I mean they were overwhelmed with it. And so Garvey and the board wanted the ship to go around to other islands in the Caribbean so they could see this big ship, and we got it going on and all of that. And so the cargo spoiled. They were carrying coconuts, and by the time the coconuts got to the person who had chartered them to bring it to them, they were rotten. So and the captain kept trying to tell them, I can't be going around to all these islands. I got to get this this cargo to where it's supposed to go. And what that brings up also is that the captains of the ships and the UNIA bumped heads, because the captains are like, yay, right on, Black people. But I got to do this, and this in order for this to work. Right. And you got to give me the money to do this, and this. And because it was, the ship was not in really good shape, it kept breaking down. So they had, on top of all the other expenses I outlined, they had the expense of trying to keep this boat afloat. Right. The second time that it went out, the cargo went okay. Oh, another thing I should mention is that not only did they carry cargo, they also had room for passengers. So people, in the African diaspora, if you're stuck on an island, right, it's not a lot of land to be parceled out. Slavery, even though it was over in 1835 for the island, people wanted to get off the island,
Mm-hmm.
but they also wanted to send things back, to their people.
Yeah.
So they had passengers on some of these boats on the ship as well. The second time the ship went out, it's still not clear exactly what happened. It was the time of, what do you call it, prohibition, and some people were getting their liquor out of New York and out of place, so they um
Smuggling.
now they weren't smuggling, they were just moving it out of
Mm.
America to Cuba and places like that.
Yes.
And so what happened is still, let us say, a mystery, because the liquor started disappearing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The one story is that people knew this was happening. All this liquor was being transported.
Oh, keep going.
Yeah, transported, and so that this boat came up alongside of the ship and stole the liquor. Right. And then there's other stories that said that the seamen were started drinking the liquor.
So let me ask. So we have got the Black Star Line. Clearly there's a demand for it. Clearly there's a need and people who want to use it. It's a great idea. Clearly there are some challenges with just like logistics and managing the costs. Was that all that it took to bring that down, or was there more at play?
There was more. There was more at play than that. And thank you for doing that, because
End of the mic.
oh
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up, because I lost my train of thought for a bit there. The UNIA was infiltrated.
Mm.
And it's like, well, why would Britain and the United States want to spy on this one little organization whose funds wasn't anywhere near as much as other corporations or other business entities? Well, one is at the end of World War One. Europe had tore itself up fighting each other. They done blew up everything. Mm-hmm. So they needed resources from their colonies in order to rebuild, right? And they needed labor from their colonies in Africa and in the Caribbean. They needed to pay attention to that. But the Black Star Line had upset people, excited people, and they were concerned that they would slow down the production of
Divert those
resources.
resources.
Yeah. Secondly, there was so much infiltration of the UNIA. This one spy, his number was 800. I'd like to smack him myself. I would like to beat him up. I swear. I just think I could, because I'd be so mad. He was the person who worked in administration at the UNIA, and he would open the mail for Garvey and other leaders, and he would send it to the FBI. Well, they didn't call it the FBI at that time. It was just called BI.
I
And
think he was the first black agent.
That's true. First black FBI
COINTELPRO.
agent. Yep.
I
Mhm.
doubt it. I doubt it seriously. There was another one who did much the same thing. And they would like open the mail, before Garvey and others. And sometimes they would let it go through. They would decide. In fact, they were determining what he could get and what he wouldn't get.
Mm.
Right. So it turned out that one of his best friends was an agent
Wow.
that was spying on him. And then some of the other organizations, like the African Blood Brotherhood, uh, which was a communist organization, were also spying on them. Another problem that they had is that when they came out with this Black Star Line, people, as I said, were interested for various reasons. Some people wanted to invest. Some people wanted to use the line, right? Some people wanted to be passengers on the line. All those, uh, all those reasons. But the UNIA, I mean, imagine this for Kefra. You do some kind of program. Well, now everything's electronic. But people were sending money in to buy stock. They had so much money that they had it on a table, right? Just out in the open. Because Garvey was not there. The only way that they could keep things going is to have Garvey speaking all over the country and in the islands. So this money would accumulate, right? And nobody could really do anything with it because he wasn't there.
So there's an aspect, so there's almost like an aspect of like just like mismanagement as like that scale is what
Or
you're
maybe
saying.
infrastructure.
Yeah, lack of
Yeah,
infrastructure,
yeah.
yeah.
But also lack of knowledge. They did not expect to be inundated with
Oh,
all this money at one time. It was like, what the
lift
hell?
the microphone. Yeah. Okay.
It's like, what the hell? It's all this money is coming in. Now, I know that we are good people and all of that. But if there's money laying around, I wonder if anybody took some
Yeah.
No.
because they number was 11.
Yeah. I want to, so we did have a few more people join in, so I want to give them opportunities to check in. Thank you, Mama Rama. That was a really sort of like detailed and like broad overview just of like, the scale and the impact of
Mhm.
like this organization. And I think that that's definitely going to help us as we like, talk a little bit more about like, the legacy of that,
Yeah.
because
But one of the things I want to say is, not only was UNI the first mass organization, during this process between 1919 and 1923, they raised almost $1 million,
yeah.
which would be, I've been trying to check up on this, almost 12 million today.
Whew.
But can you imagine people not 100 years out of slavery hearing about somebody that, I mean, even imagining
Yeah.
a Black organization being able to do that? But
Yeah, after we let folks check in, I want to ask a little bit more about that. Just
yeah, there's
what you got? Well,
it's a chart. I just wanted to read off these numbers.
find that chart, and then once after the check-ins, we can have you go through it. What's up, y'all? Let's maybe hear from Rasul first. It's number,
Hold
color.
on.
Oh, okay. Aguila, you want to start us off instead? It's
Sure.
number, color, and either your last international trip, or if you have never taken an international trip, what would you like your first international trip to be?
Mm, okay. I am feeling like a black 8. Pretty good. And I would say my last international trip was Malaysia 2 years ago.
Sweet. Pass it.
Pass it to Zante.
Oh crap. Okay, sorry y'all. It's Cassandra. My kid had a
Oh, no
virtual
Oh, what up,
worries.
day.
Cass?
Hey guys.
Yeah, my kid had a virtual day, so I forgot to change the name back.
Don't worry, I'll pass it to you, Cass.
Okay. I'd say about hmm. I always wonder, is the numbers from 1 to 10 or is just any number?
Any number.
Hmm. I don't know. I'm feeling 77 today. So a 77, uh, bluish gray. The weather here is kind of on the chilly side. Um, and I've never traveled internationally. Like I don't think Canada counts. It does it.
Yeah, it counts.
For
Okay,
now,
well,
it's a
I
separate country. So yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, I've been to Niagara Falls, but I also have also wanted to go to Africa too. And let's see, who else? I'll pass it to you. Let's see. Uh,
Deidre Rasul or J. Rue?
okay. I guess I can pass it to Deru. Can't even talk today.
What's going on, beautiful people? What is the checking question?
Last international trip or the first place you'd like to go internationally?
Yeah. Okay, I think I would go to, well, first I'm a red and black 10. And the last place I was at internationally was Cancun like 8 years ago for spring break. That was a great trip. The next place I'd want to go to, um, somewhere in Africa. I'm thinking either Ghana or Ethiopia both interest me. And did I hear there was somebody else who needed it to be passed to them?
I think it's just Rasul and Miss Deidre who haven't gone yet.
Okay, I'll pass it to Miss Deidre. Hey, Deidre.
Hey, hey, J. Rue, how you doing? Um, why in the world did I put on this camera? Okay, I was not camera ready. Okay, there we go. I'll try. Um, I am I would say like a silver with gold flecks of like little gold flecks of paint. And my number from 1 to 10 is like, I would say a 7.5. A lot going on here in DC. So just,
Oh, do
dealing with
tell.
that. Well, I mean, if you look at the news, you will see they're
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to destroy the last 25 years of my career. But anyway, but we soldier on every day. Last place I've been in Africa was Lesotho, which I go to probably at least twice a year. It's one of my favorite places. And it is the tiny country that is surrounded by South Africa. So it kind of looks like it's a lake in
Hmm.
South Africa, but it's a
Yeah.
country. So I've been going next, actually, March 1st will be the 20th anniversary of my first trip to Lesotho. And I've been 27 times now, I think, 27, 28 times. So
Yeah.
that was my last trip. And I was supposed to be on a plane to Togo next week, but not doing that anymore, unfortunately. So there we go. Um, I will pass it to, I think it was
I think
Rasul.
Rasul's the only one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pass it to Rasul. Hey, Sulu.
How's it going? I am probably a red 5 today, and uh, a place to travel. I'll probably say, oh, really, there's a lot of places. I really want to visit a Mediterranean place, so probably somewhere in the Mediterranean, like somewhere in Egypt, Turkey, Greece, Crete, any of those places, and probably somewhere in Africa, probably like Ghana or South Africa. So,
Wonderful. Thanks
Okay.
y'all for hopping in. Mama Ramla stepped away for a second, but I think that while we wait for her to come back, yeah, I would just love if anybody has any reflections from what they've heard so far or anything that they want to add. Um, I think that one thing that really stands out to me is just like, that piece around just the different costs of membership based on like the economic like situation in the different places. I think that like, that sort of like adaptability. I think like some people would call that like catering to your base. I just think that um like I'm just like thinking about how effective that must have been at the time and just like clearly, it was, but just like in like creating as much opportunity as possible for people to be a part of this movement. So I think that's something that's really sticking with me. But I would love to hear what other folks are thinking about, or even that they would like to know more about when Mama Ramla comes back.
I would really like to know when he um, went back to Jamaica. How did he live out the rest of his life? And
Right.
did his was his father heavily involved in law? I think I read someplace that his father took care of everybody's legal thoughts and ideas and needs on the
Mhm.
island. I'd like to know more about that before Garvey was famous part and especially when he got back. Because, a lot of times you jump out there and you do great good, and
Yeah,
sometimes you can get disappointed. Okay, so you're
yeah,
not in the limelight anymore. That doesn't mean that you're still not continuing to work for a community. So I'd
yeah.
like
So
to know
Miss
more about
Fish,
that.
so more about like his the latter half of his life and career. Okay, yeah, that
Hmm.
makes sense. That makes
Now that
sense.
he's gotten his pardon.
What's he up to today? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because he knew he hadn't done wrong. He had just done good. But did he
Hmm.
succumb to the
Yeah.
negativity that would have been around him when he got back home?
I think it's really, you asked about sort of like the earlier part of his life as well, and one of the interesting things that I noted about his life when I was doing some of my research is just that like, even though he did not come from an especially wealthy background, he had a godfather who worked at this company and an uncle who ran this kind of business, and other relatives that helped him get here, and so it's just like, there was a large network of support that sort of like helped him gain opportunities and move around and travel and like learn and educate himself that definitely like laid the ground for like his personal contributions, so I definitely think that that's important to note. But welcome
I
back,
would
Mama
like
Ramla.
to hear Rama's journey to Marcus Garvey.
Your journey to Marcus Garvey.
What do you mean? Why did I choose to do research on him?
Yeah, what was your personal journey to Garvey or the UNIA?
I was just very interested in the African diaspora. And I had heard of Garvey and read the usual biographies of him. Um, but it was because the Black Star Line attracted me that I wanted to look deeper into what was going on, um, how that jumped off, why they even did it. Even though I personally believe that the African diaspora is a real entity and that there are connections between Black people and people of any other diaspora. And that although their financial and political programs may be faint so that it's hard to study them, I could study the Black Star Line. It was enough information. And let me just give a shout out to Robert Hill, who has is pulled all the papers he can together. I mean, from whatever source he could. And so I went through those 10 volumes, and now I understand there's 13 volumes. And it's so fascinating to read this and find corroboration for what it was that I thought was true.
So let me ask a question, and this is one that I had before you stepped away for a second. And I guess it's like a two-parter. Um, First part is with the UNIA, being recognized as like really like the first of its kind in terms of like mass movements across the diaspora. Why was that? Like why had this never happened before, and what were the conditions that allowed this one to succeed? And then I guess like related to that is you said that the political presence of the African diaspora is faint, like why is that, you know?
Because we don't. We don't have the resources, uh, and that includes educational resources. Uh, a good example would be Deidre. There's not many Black people who have the kind of education and experience that Deidre has. Because even when Black people do travel to other places, they're not necessarily doing economic work or trying to make economic links.
Mm,
Usually it's cultural, or it's existential in the sense that people want to go to Africa or to the islands uh, to just see another group of Black people. And of course, people go to the islands also just for pleasure. Again, culture and the arts and entertainment. Um, so that's one thing. And the second thing is we don't know about each other very much.
mm,
Most people think of the diaspora outside of Africa as um, the islands, Central and South America, and the United States and Canada. And that's where it stops. But there are large Black communities all over Europe. There are Black communities, I was surprised to find out, in Australia. And then when I looked at the globe, I could see why East Africans go to Australia, because it's closer.
yeah.
It's closer than Britain, the United States, etc. So they're in other parts of the world, usually pursuing education, which may turn into a professional position, but not linking along economic lines. And I would argue that that is because um, economic resources are very tight in these communities. And so people don't really see too far beyond taking care of their own families and investing in businesses here. And to take that further, Jen, why don't we have a lot of businesses in the United States? Why isn't there other Black uh, Tulsas?
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't there shopping centers, banks, and other businesses? Why? I'd like to open that up to people. Deidre, Paulette, why? We tend not to make economic ties. We'll dance together, we'll sing together, we'll party together.
White man's ice is colder.
Yeah, well, there's some of that, but I think I just at least on the international front, I think that it's there's a sustained presence that's needed before you can make those economic ties. So, like I was saying, I
Yeah.
mean, the work that I do, that I've been able to do, is based on almost 30 years ago. I moved, I left my Fortune 500 job, Fortune 500 company job, and moved to Ghana in '96. So when I started working there, I mean, and then was there, and then I came back. But when I started working there again in 2011, like I knew people, I had relationships that I had for years. I had taken people over, and and that is like in a lot of places what you need in order to sustain those economic ties, because people aren't, you can a lot of times you can't just get off the plane and say, hey, let's do business. People, because they're gonna be like, who are you? So you need to be able to not just go once or sometimes twice or three times or four times, but like make it a sustained relationship
Yeah.
building type of enterprise, and then you can. So I think we need to do more of that. So yeah, I tell people when they go to, I'm like, yeah, enjoy the cultural and the artistic. So all of that is phenomenal. But if you're looking to actually possibly, start a business or, a partner, you're gonna have to look at this as a long-term proposition, not just you go over once. So
Yeah.
But also, Africa and the islands don't have the infrastructure to support a lot of business development, like water systems that go all the way through.
electricity, reliable
Transit time.
electricity.
There's not the bank. There's not the financial infrastructure, and we don't have financial infrastructure for Black people here. And that's a study I wish I could do. It's like, why is that? Because now there is some capital that should be available, because there are some Black people who do have money. It's like, where are you investing it? But that's one thing people put on the UNIA. They said because the UNIA failed with the Black Star Line, Black people didn't want to invest money with Black concerns, right? And they said that also with the doing Reconstruction, the Reconstruction Bank, they wanted to bring Frederick Douglass. It wasn't Frederick Douglass's fault. They had white people on the boards because they're trying to learn financial, procedures and things like that. They stole the money. And then again, they said Black people don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. And so therefore, we don't want to invest in ourselves. I don't know what the answer is, but I have always been, why would you spend $3,000 on a purse? And I promise you, it was hard for me to believe that people would spend $1,000 on their hair. $1,000 American. I ain't talking pesos here. It's like I don't know what that's about. I don't know. I think that there are, politicians and legislatures that we have that have tapped us into money from some government programs and nonprofits. So I'm not saying we don't have any money. I just don't know why. Well, I just don't know why we don't have
Well,
an economic
I do
position.
I do think that one thing that's important to remember about the UNIA's like platform though, and and maybe I think this gets more a little bit more into like the political aspect of this economic project, but like, they weren't talking about like let's make more money so we can be better members of white society, like they were seeking like sovereignty and independence, Um, and I think that the mindset of like, let me build something separate from the existing structures that is designed for me and that I have some ability to shape gives you a very different like set of priorities than saying like, let me become a better participant in the existing dominant economic system, because then, if the existing system tells you that the expensive purse or the extravagant hairstyle is the most important thing to buy, then you'll go with that, but if the project that you support says that like, we should be investing in infrastructure and building trade pathways between like different like nations and stuff, like it gives you a different sort of like lens on things. So there's that cultural aspect to it as well, I think.
Yeah, I was
Well, you
going to
know,
add that the economic element can't be separate from the cultural element. They're intertwined and work hand in hand.
Yeah.
But I am curious. My vision impaired. I'm curious if maybe Nas, J. Rue, of course, Baby Boy Wonder, Khaled. If if you guys have any perspectives, you would add to the question that Mama Ramla is raising around the why.
Basically like why kind of like almost like why black people don't invest or seem not to invest in black businesses and black initiatives and like independence
outside of restaurants
outside of restaurants. Black people will support a black restaurant
and a mega church.
or or a mega church, yes.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if well, of course it's a big problem, so it's always going to be a couple of things. But I think you see that with a lot of stores everywhere, like across racial lines, even where, mom and pop shops do not exist anymore. Like they're getting obliterated. And I would put a lot of black businesses in that boat because a lot of them are just, uh, a family or something like that starting something up, or maybe some brothers starting something up. And it's not common for people to just go to the mom and pop when there's a huge chain that's taking up all the real estate of a whole shopping district. And, you're just trying to do what you do. Uh, yeah, I think it's like convenience as well. There's just like a lot that goes into it, but all that to say, I think it's definitely not that we wouldn't support each other. I don't think there is maybe it's like a focused enough effort, right? And it's always going to be difficult as long as we're trying to aspire to um just like replicating the economy that exists right now, when we could be, having a focused effort trying to build our own. Of course, that's always easier said than done. So who knows?
Well, the interesting thing is that before integration, black businesses were prospering, but they couldn't get any capital, right? And now there's some inroads to capital, right? But not focused on community building. This barber once said to me, one of my a barber, he said that he said what happened was, he said, barbers and other small businesses in the community, when schools opened up, they wanted their children to be corporate lawyers and professors and uh, bankers, this, that, and the other, and not keep those small businesses or those business concerns in the community going. And that I've always kept that in my mind. I just think that's a piece of it. I don't know how big that piece is, but anyway, I wanted to say this before I forget about the Black Star Line. Is that they bought in total 3 ships, and they were about to buy one that they were going to call the Phyllis Wheatley to be the Africa ship. In terms of purchase price, the cumulative total of the total is $295,000. Outstanding principal after the trial, which I hope I get to talk about the trial. After the trial, the outstanding principal on those boats was $40,000. So they were paying it all. But because of the operating expenses and the breakdowns and things, they spent $346,000 on repairs and such, so that the estimated income of all of that was only $65,000.
So they spent more on repairs than they spent
It
on the
did not
ship.
anything because they didn't
Man,
know, you know,
yeah.
yeah,
But that's
yeah.
how you learn.
But the fact that they got it down to $40,000, I never hear people talk about that. You know, they act
Mhm.
like they just bought the ship, they didn't do anything. Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yes, they did. And to say that you had purchase price that added up to $295,000, and at the end you owe 40,000,
That's big. It's big.
you know. So, but anyway, I like to touch on two other things that I think are critical.
Can I say something real quick before you do? Yeah, I just wanted to because you were talking about just like the way that like schools opened up and a lot of black people were like, okay, they sent their kids to become corporate lawyers, they sent them directly into the system. And, going back to that cultural element, I think it's also important just to like understand and remind people that like one of the big disagreements between the UNIA and the NAACP was their stance on integration. And obviously the NAACP was very much about civil rights integration for black people into American society under the law, whereas the UNIA, their goal was a sovereign nation for black people, and a politically unified Africa, where that would be based. I think there was also like I believe the UNIA was a big supporter of the project in Liberia as well.
Oh, I
Um,
want to talk about that for a
yeah,
minute.
well, yeah, I think it would be good to
Yeah,
talk about that a little
yeah.
bit, as well as the trial, because like we said, we're not here to idolize and lionize like any of these figures. We're here to talk about like the significance and the relevance to history, and so like you do have to talk about Liberia and the trial. So yes, please, please.
Um,
We got notes. While Mama Rama's, of course not. While you're getting those notes ready, Mimi, would you like to check in for us? It's number, color, and then your last international trip.
Hey y'all, I am feeling like the number zero because it encapsulates, I think, everything and nothing all at once. And the color is like um like a light blue, like a really shallow pool of water. And my last international travel, my dad turned 70 a couple weeks ago, and my family went to Puerto Rico. Back to you.
Thank you, Sekou. Back to you, Mama Ramla.
okay. Liberia is important also. I think that, I find it interesting that when we started to reconnect with Africa, we connected with Nigeria and Ghana, but not Liberia, um, because it was run by what's called Americo Liberian. And I think one of the reasons I think is that Liberia was set up by white people, the American Colonization Society, and they just went over there and pushed people off the land and put ex-slaves there and named this town called Monrovia for President Monroe. And they just started acting like white people. they
Yeah.
just, you know, they just,
Yeah.
today that's still a problem there. But the UNIA saw Liberia as a place to develop because there were not language barriers. It was assumed they had an understanding of the diaspora because that's where they had come from. But Liberia is a country. And during the war, the things that they were able to, the exports they were able to deal with went to Europe for the most part. And in fact, one of their biggest trading partners was Germany. And so when Germany got beat up, their experts declined and they needed money to keep the government operational. And so they needed $5 million, they said, and asked the UNIA for $5 million. They didn't have even $5 million. So of course they got it from the US. They did set up 2 settlements in Liberia. But the problem, of course, was financing. Wasn't enough money for the UNIA to pay for them. The humid weather tended to be something that caused problems. And having enough tools, but that goes back to money again. Having the tools they needed for these agricultural projects just wasn't there. And Britain and the United States wanted them to kick UNIA out. So they wanted that $5 million so they could survive. So guess what they did?
Kick them out.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to do research on what happened in Nigeria and Ghana, but I do know that Nigeria and Ghana were interested in the Black Star Line, but they were not interested in the political part of the program because, they felt like we didn't understand what was going on there. We had no idea what colonialization was, what it did to Africa. We didn't understand that everybody didn't speak English, that there were hundreds, literally maybe thousands, Deidre, of tribes and nations. And we didn't know none of that. So it was like, you don't know what you're talking about politically. But on this economic front, I'm with you. I'm with you when you're right. Right? So we do know that about Liberia and, Nigeria and Ghana.
How do you think that how do you think that how do you think that the UNIA's like goals of like, state building, nation building and sovereignty and like under that framework, how do you think that affected the relationships that they were trying to develop with some of these other like established countries at that point?
Well, one thing I would say is that the Du Boisian Pan-African Congresses that were in Europe, there was only one Pan-African Congress here, that they were able to talk to each other and understand better what was going on with the various diasporan communities as well as African communities.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to figure out how to put that together. And sometimes they did do things together. So for example, at the, oh hell, what conference was that called? The conference after World War One, the Pan-African Congress wanted to speak to that convention,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they couldn't because they weren't a nation.
Yeah.
But what they did is that Haiti, Liberia, and Ethiopia let them speak through them. So they would do, there's some things they could do together, but some of the larger, more complicated economic development types of issues was very hard to do when you don't have any resources.
Yeah.
And when you don't understand well, now what we call the global economy.
Yeah.
People don't, very few people, Imhotep, Paulette, Deidre, and other people I know around here understand that. But most people don't understand that.
Yeah. 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 So it's what I'm hearing is that it's almost like a combination of like, one, they didn't really have nation making money, but also they didn't know how to play that game well enough.
They didn't understand each other.
Mm.
You like what, 50 years younger than me or something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah. How much did you learn about the Caribbean, Africa, and Black populations in Europe when you were in school?
Not enough. Not a lot at all.
I learned none.
Yeah.
You know, people like Paulette and me, we had to do that ourselves
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't out there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you could learn about Booker T. Washington. And from what I understood, Africa, I thought Africa was a country, it wasn't a continent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so not understanding each other, not being cosmopolitan, um, hurts our efforts to improve our political and economic situation. And we're doing good in America, I think, you know, with politics coming out of the church into the public square, where you have people like Stacey Abrams, uh, and what's that sister's name? Is it Tolbert or Colbert, or I forget what her name is. But we, you know, we have a handle on it now, and we're beginning to understand the role of international institutions, and that's a good thing. But we do not understand Africa, and we don't understand the Caribbean.
I see, Deidre, I see you got a hand up. You had a question or
Sure,
something
yeah,
you
I
want
have
to
a
add?
sure. I just had a question from Mama Ramla. In terms of, when you were talking about some of the impediments to that Pan-Africanist conversation, particularly
Yeah.
post World War One. What do you think was the impact of having pretty much all of the countries in Africa, not just sub-Saharan Africa, but Africa,
Mhm.
except for Liberia and Ethiopia, being under colonial rule in terms of the degrees of freedom that Black nationalists, because they were in these countries even under colonial rule, but their just ability to come together and um, to connect, with
Good
American
question.
and Caribbean.
I think that there are two things that's going on as it relates to Africa. They were brought up in either the British colonial system, the French colonial system, or the Belgian colonial systems. And so they are in three different cultures and economies,
Mm.
right? And the resources that they have are not theirs. They are still controlled to this day, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
by Europe, not
True.
themselves.
Yeah.
I think that that's one thing that we have to look at. And the same is true for the Caribbean. Um, I guess we all think like people talk like Jamaican man, but there's the French, uh, Britain, all of them are tied up in cultures that are different from our own here. We strive to embrace the whole of ourselves, but we're under American culture. Some of them are in the British culture, French culture, and I don't even know what you want to call Australia. That's an interesting case. So those kind of things hold us back, and it's difficult getting beyond them because you have to struggle with capitalism and the power and structure of corporations, which are not going to, to voluntarily try to incorporate you into their stuff. Hell, they stole your stuff. What makes you think they're gonna give it back?
Yeah.
And that's so there's problems on the horizon that block our being able to implement some of the theories or goals that we want to do.
Yeah.
I think that the puncture we made in the UN, in terms of people like Rice being there, the internationalization of Colin Powell, and other different types of political things going on in the international political economy are um, we're beginning to understand them. You know what I mean? Deidre, how long would it take you to try to explain to me what is going on in Lesotho, and what are the sources of your income, and what projects are you able to do. That would take a while because I don't know, you know,
Right. I
you
mean,
know what I'm saying?
it took a while for me and I'm still
Yeah,
learning,
yeah,
20 years later.
yeah. So theory is this like small thimble that thinks that it can comprehend the world, and that's just not so. It's just not so. And that's why I'm so proud of Kemper. I'm proud of Kemper because Kemper has given young people and anybody who wants to work with Kemper a better understanding of the world that they live in a voice that they're able to understand. And I think if there were 10, 15 Kempers in Indianapolis, we'd be in a whole hell of a lot better shape because these young people's minds have been open to the possibilities and to situations that they would not have ordinarily encountered, even in college. They would not have encountered. And Rasul, I ain't trying to embarrass you or nothing, but just observing Rasul over the years that I have known him, what's it like, call it 15, 20? Yeah, to watch him come to be a man and think about what his possibilities would have been without Kemper. It's amazing. It is amazing. And y'all have managed to do an interesting integration that I thought I'd never see. You know, but it's not a lot of organizations like this. And I want to, I'm getting ready to get in trouble now.
Hey, you live for it.
I did want to pick on a few. Oh, Alvin dropped out, but that's okay. I did want to give a pick on a few people who maybe haven't spoken up so far. Maybe Cass, you usually have something to add or something to ask. I'd love to hear what your thoughts on the conversation so far have been. If there's anything you'd maybe want to hear about before we get out of here.
Oh, I didn't mention anything about the trial.
We'll get to the
Yeah, we got to
trial.
hear about the fraud charge too, please.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
As I said, I keep wanting to take this mask off so bad.
Yeah.
Um, you know, woo, okay, get it together, Ramla. Um, he was brought up on mail fraud. They didn't really know what to do with Garvey, and some of the things. Here's the big mistake that Garvey made. They made a case against him on some very flimsy evidence. About something that was mailed to a UNIA member or something. It was very flimsy. But Garvey decided to represent himself. But there were Black lawyers back in the day then that had worked with Booker T and the Black Republicans and all of that. If he would have let them represent him, I don't think he would have went to prison. But he was sentenced, I think, 4 or 5 years, served 2, and then was deported. But they had him on this mail fraud charge. The other 3 people who had Black lawyers, but I don't think that that's who the government was after anyway, right? That cost him because he wasn't able to come back into the United States. Not really in Canada either. And he's stuck on this island, right? And he finally goes to London, but it was hard to build in London the way he could in America because America is closer to Canada and to the islands, etc. But the mail fraud trial, I mean, it's just full of all uh, uh, the spying and stuff that was going on, and some of the people who testified against him. It was,
And they did pardon him for it, so yeah.
yeah, it was
Dangerous sent in. The saying goes, the
Yeah.
person who chooses to represent themselves in court is a fool for a client.
Yeah. You know, part of that when I was in the National Archives reading the trial transcript, that's what kept coming to my mind.
Mm.
It's kind of like, and the lawyers would step in sometimes and save him, right? Because he don't know what questions to ask or anything. So they would step in a little bit. But he, you know,
Yeah.
he was stubborn, which is, I think that would be the opposite of M, in the sense that M is able to say, I need help, or this might not be the way to go, and listen to somebody else. But Garvey, I mean, he was in a fight, and he knew he was in a fight, and he was, people that he had been struggling with the whole time, with the ABB and the NAACP and all these others. People can say what they want to about Du Bois. Du Bois did not participate in that trial. He did not. I don't think I don't think A. Philip Randolph did either. But I think that it says something to think that with all that the UNIA went through, the only thing you can charge him with is mail fraud based on one letter.
Yeah.
Dang.
Um,
When he went back to Jamaica when he got deported, from listening to you, he tried to keep the organization strong and
Yeah.
going.
He
Um,
put
I
again,
had
the infrastructure wasn't there.
I had read somewhere about it was the UNIA that inspired the ANC in South Africa. And the ANC was all up in the 40s. And so when he went to London, did he ever go to Africa? And
I looked for that, Paulette. I looked for that, but I could find no evidence that he ever got to go to Africa. He died in London. He had, this is another thing I just wanted to say. It's kind of like just a tidbit, is that, they were still arguing back and forth, these various organizations debating with each other. But he had gotten sick and people knew that he was sick. He had asthma and things like that, and he couldn't hardly breathe in London. He woke up one day after being sick and his obituary was in the paper. So can you imagine reading your own obituary and them saying all these terrible things about him, right? I don't think he ever recuperated from that. And not long after that, he died in 1940. He was only 52.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, he got a
But
lot done.
his doctor, he had an Indian doctor. And the Indian doctor was out of town. And I don't know whether he was hospitalized. I couldn't find that out. I guess if I kept, I didn't see anything about that. But he died in London, and he was there for how many years? 20, 25 years.
Oh, really?
Until Jamaica brought him back to
Yeah, they reburied him.
yeah.
Yeah. But we do need to start wrapping up in a few minutes. So I wanted to hear from Cass. I know Alvin's got some reflections, and then I want to hear from you as well, College. So
I have been just digesting information because a lot of this, of course, I did not know. I didn't end up learning African American history until college. But one thing that did stand out to me was um, about the businesses that we choose to support in the Black community. Was very interesting because yeah, I do agree. When there's a restaurant, when there's a church, I feel like these businesses are very supported in our community. But anything else, I just feel like there's not as much support, um, which is very unfortunate because I just feel like we could be doing we could be supporting so many other businesses instead of just the same businesses that we choose to support. And sometimes I've been like thinking like is it like a fear thing, maybe because, you know, because of what happened in Tulsa and in other places, is it a fear of doing something different? Because I've noticed that, like, they let us have churches, they let us have restaurants, but I just noticed that banks, um, different corporations, we're I don't know, we're just there's just not a
Well,
many of
I
them.
think I think the food business and the church business, they have low barriers of entry. Often the amount of capital you need to start a restaurant is small, even smaller to start a church. So some of those businesses are just a function of resources needed to launch. The barriers of entry, we'll say in this case, whiteness, white supremacy, are not as constrained um, as 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 a couple of those factors. That's the only factors, but those are a couple of reasons why those businesses tend to, dare I say, prosper, even if they don't prosper for long lengths of time.
Yeah. Let's hear from Alvin. You talking? We can't hear you. Uh-oh.
What?
I don't know.
Alvin.
You there, Alvin?
He's trying. Yeah.
Let's
Yeah, I know he's not feeling super hot, so it might just be.
Okay,
give
I'm
him a
back, I
second.
think.
Oh,
Oh, there.
there he is. Yeah.
Sorry, all. And again, apologies if this has been asked while I was sick as a dog over here. But thank you, Dr. Bandalia. I am curious if you could imagine some of the leadership of the UNIA talking to, let's say, KEPRA and maybe even other community organizations like ours and communities now in this current political and social moment. What advice or suggestions or questions do you think they would have for us from their lessons from history, while
That's
also
a good
noting
one.
this is a recorded conversation?
That's a good question. Um, I think they would warn you about infiltration. I think they would say that you've done an excellent job, in terms of the work you've done in urban farming and other programs that you have. They probably would ask why you're not as politically active as they were.
Interesting.
Thank you, Dr. Vandelli. And on that political active piece, what would they, I guess, from their lessons in engaging in the political sphere, what would be some of the lessons learned? Because I would say, in some ways, everything is political.
You cut out there a little bit. You cut out there a little. You're cutting out a little bit, Alvin.
I'm sorry, Al. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, I was just going to ask on follow up on that question about not being as politically engaged. What would they, from their lessons learned, think about or recommend to us about, like, I guess I would just say that in a world that almost everything is political now, whether it's explicit or not,
Alvin
in
from there.
how to engage in the political space and not face the same problems that they did potentially, or mitigate those.
They didn't have the opportunity to participate in political institutions. And I think they could see that we now have the opportunity to participate in political institutions, and probably why we don't have as much political representation that we do, given the size of our population. See, they couldn't do that, you know. Du Bois, though I think, let me see. I think there were maybe 2 Black Congress people, maybe, and hardly any on a local or state level at all. But if that's where the resources are, then that's what they would want to go to get. And they probably would say, beware of theory. Beware of theory, because you know the whole idea of the Black Star Line was a great idea and it was needed, but they did not have the understanding before they jumped in with both feet. And the same for Du Bois jumping in with getting involved in African politics, you know, jumping in with confident in your theory, although you don't really have any
Practice.
or experience or knowledge of them.
Yeah.
And I would say that probably most people, well, we already know y'all's president don't know about the Constitution. But most people don't understand how these institutions work. And I think that they would have loved to have been able to dive in. And they couldn't. They had to do everything outside of the political system.
Yeah.
And you cannot really accomplish much outside the political system.
Yeah.
Well, then that's just
Thank
my
you.
opinion.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. You know, the other thing that Garvey did, or the UNIA did, was to use, well, yeah, I don't even think we probably could do this now, but to use people like Henrietta Benton Davis to draw people to you so that you could present them the program on a continuing basis.
Tying yourself to something popular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But positive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I have no clue of how to do something like that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that to me almost speaks to, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier just about how you know, just like the closeness of our community has shifted, you know, and there was a time when, you know, our most popular athletes and artists lived down the street from many of us, you know, in our neighborhoods. You know, you could know them personally, but that's definitely not the case anymore.
But that's what I mean
Yeah,
about
they live here on our phones.
but you know, that's one of the things I mean about capital.
Yeah.
You know, there are some billionaires in the community. There are millionaires, and I just don't know why the capital, it looked like it was for a while.
But they're not really in the
remember
community.
when there was some investment in Carol's daughter,
Yeah.
some investments in a few more businesses, but I don't see, it doesn't look to me like they invest in the community. But I think I may be very wrong about that, because it just may not be, you know, in the news or anything.
Sure.
But I don't see any evidence of that. I think Magic Johnson did for a while. He started some theaters and things, but I don't see the connection between the entertainers and famous people that we have with the development of economic structures in the community. I don't see it.
That might be a conversation for a whole other mumbo jumbo. All these rich Black people, where's all the money going? But I did want to hear from you, Khalid, before we start wrapping up. Just, you know, any questions, any reflections, just anything that's on your mind after, you know, listening to this conversation that we've had about, you know, Black people building up stuff, basically.
I still don't get the point why he is the reason why we get to call ourselves Black people. Like,
So, and I'm gonna tell myself a little bit. So, that's something I said to Khaled in the car, and I think what I was trying to get at is more just that like this mass movement that united all these people from these different places of the world was one of the things that contributed to a shared identity, that is, it's the reason that, it's, or part of the reason that black people in America and black people in the Caribbean recognize each other as black, even though we don't come from the same place. Does that make sense?
It is existential reasons. If you are from Africa or the United States or Canada or Australia or what have you, you are not treated as a citizen, or you are not treated um, or have the same protections as other people. And Black people realize that that is the case. To step away from race, women, have ties to each other because we know how women can be treated and what happens if you're in a situation where you're raped, or you're not protected, or you are told you can't participate in politics or whatever. American women are together on that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because they're being mistreated because of their gender, and there can be other reasons. The I can't say all them letters. LG
LGBT. Yeah.
plus,
Yeah. Plus,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. They have, you know, uh, understanding the existential situation where they can be killed or mistreated, so they identify around it. Like, if you go in there in a skirt, they're gonna beat you up.
Yeah.
I ain't going in there in my skirt.
Yeah.
But they share things.
Yeah. And to bring it back to the UNIA and
Oh, I forgot I did this thing.
I think they could hear you. But to bring it back to the UNIA and the Marcus Garvey, I think like what that did was that was really the first, or one of the first movements that drew that economic connection between black people in different places, that black people in America and black people in Africa and Europe and the Caribbean can all pool our resources together to build something that supports all of us. And yeah, I don't think we've ever seen anything like that happen since. Would you say, have we?
Well, this wasn't a movement, but it's an article I wrote that you might find interesting about this man named Charles Barnett. He was a newspaper man, and when they built the organization of African Unity. Oh, sorry.
All good.
Uh, when they did the Organization of African Unity, he went to Africa to all the meetings and made sure that Black people in other countries around the world knew about it, right? So that they could participate in the building of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
The civil rights movement, although the flavor of it was about American independence,
Sure.
had a big influence on the entire world.
That's true. South Africa.
And we ended up with political representatives that helped to politicize the Black communities in Britain in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So that they ended up, like, we had a Black caucus, they had a Black parliamentarian, something, and so they helped them what do you call it? Uh, the Islamic,
The nation.
yeah, Nation of Islam also had that influence on in Britain as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about as close
Yeah.
as I can.
So I'm gonna pass you one more question, Kyle, and then we'll close it out. With that context, I guess like, and especially like as a young person,
Hey,
do you,
Chan, quick question. Is Nas also in the room?
yeah, he's back there behind. He's back there
All right,
behind the
behind
desk.
the can. Okay. All right, go
Yeah.
ahead. My bad.
Do you see what potential, if any, do you see for like black people around the world to come together and work together for something, you know? What's something that you think that we could organize around? Or do you think it's possible?
Sure, sure.
What why about around then tell us why.
There'll come a time where there'll be enough rich black people that will make some sort of thing, and then people are like, oh
Rich
man,
black
they're
people.
making good money doing this, or wow, these people are actually really smart, and then maybe we'll come together. Who knows?
Donate.kepper.org.
Paulette, Paulette, he reminds me of Rasul in the beginning.
High praise.
When y'all first got him, started growing him. Yeah.
Russell, Colin just came to live with us, what, a couple of months ago, Colin?
Yeah, something like that.
You don't want that in the streets.
Oh, let's go. Okay.
Well, to M's point, yes, there is a movement, an organization that all the black people in the world could give to and support, and we'll do our best to return that
Now, for
investment.
clarity, we take all people's money, not just black folks.
Yes, we take all people's money, and we'll return that investment to anybody who invests. And you can make that contribution at donate.kepper.org. You know, I think we've talked about it a little bit. You know, that mission. You know, the UNIA laid a lot of the groundwork, and that mission for independence and self sufficiency, and just the ability for our people and our community, local and global, to build for ourselves and provide for ourselves, that is still very much alive. And the Kepper Institute is one of the organizations that is trying to make something like that happen. So if you want us to,
Can we give some shout outs to Ram, a longtime friend, colleague,
yes,
partner in the
absolutely.
work?
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Dr. Ramla
Wow.
Bendele.
I'm your sister.
And
Yes.
sister, no doubt, all the time.
And if you can get your hands on a copy of Black Star, uh, please do. And dive into this wonderful body of research that's been put together for us to learn from. Also, shout out to the Indianapolis Recorder, another powerful and old Black institution supporting the community building mission here locally in Indianapolis. And yeah,
I like to
donate.kepper.org.
shout you guys out too, man. Impressive work as young people. Clearly demonstrates the possibilities when we support and invest in each other.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
I think that Kepler has shown that young black people and other young people, if they have a way to connect to the community, if they have a way that they can contribute, they will come and do it.
Yeah.
That's what's fascinated me so much about Kepler. You know, so I hope you all keep doing that work with young people.
We're gonna do it with your help, just like tonight.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
All righty. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Appreciate you.
Bentley.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mama Ramla.
Thanks.
I like the way you're fading
All right,
that
good night.
music in, Nas.
Good night, y'all.
Time, everyone.
So.